Our study from Revelation. I wanted to start out just a little bit. This is it's not a super long one tonight. We're just going to finish chapter 6. I didn't want to start chapter 7 because that is a whole nother piece to the puzzle. But let me just kind of pause and let's start off. Was there any questions from last week about Revelation before we? It doesn't have to be about last week. It can be anything about Revelation. Maybe questions from this morning. I mean, any thoughts or questions before we move forward? One of the things I do want you to think about as we read Revelation is there is a lot of different views on how to read it. There's what they call a preterist view, there's a futurist view, there's a lot of different views on Revelation. I've got a really good book on the 4 major views, and they go through each chapter side by side, so it's kind of like one of those comparative Bibles, so it's got the 4 major views. But there's a lot of different views, and so, if I say something or you're reading something and you think, well, I kind of interpret different, like I said last week, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. The big point that we need to understand is, Christ is going to return, and make sure you're in with Him, right? That's really just what we need to talk about. We let Jesus kind of, and God, we'll let them and the angels that you could buy, right? We'll let them kind of do what they need to do, because if we are in Christ, and we're living for Christ, then it doesn't matter. And I don't think when all of this takes place, I just don't think we're going to be sitting around being like, oh man, we were so close. The Great Tribulation happened in the 6th seal, not the 7th. We were so close there. Obviously it doesn't matter. So we talk about this to learn more, to be educated more about God. But again, there are some major themes, and that's what I really want us to focus on. That Christ is first and foremost. Christ is going to return. That's what's important. And these pictures and these images, whether they're read literal or not, it's going to be scary for those that are not with Christ. And I think that's kind of the theme that we need to take away too. And especially once we get out of chapter 7, we really start getting into chapter 8, we're going to see some pretty intense images, and those are going to be for the people that do not know Christ, that have rejected Christ, that have sent $77 to Muncie. Don't send $77 to anybody. There's my cover. So, but any questions or thoughts before we dive into this tonight? Very good.
Go back to the tribulation.
Okay.
Did you say that you thought we would still be here for the first 2 seals to be open?
So there's some question about exactly when. I think, and I believe, and I have read that we will be here for the first 6. And then it's with the 7th seal, because when the 7th seal opens, that's when the first trumpet will blow. And that is when we're going to start seeing some even bigger, the destruction from God will increase. Now, some people will say actually it will be the 6th seal, so we'll just see the first 5. And then it'll go. Some people will, of course, some have said that we're living in those times right now. I had a discussion with a lady this week, right, who was asking, would this be a literal event? Will we literally see the horses? And my address to that was, yes, I do think so. And I go back to this point that this is the end of history. This is it. I don't believe it's going to be a quiet event. And so when we read this, and as we see what John is going to say here, and he's going to describe things, right? And as a matter of fact, tonight we're going to read what he's going to talk about with the 5th and 6th seal, and it's a very, very ominous, it's that very dark thunderstorm that's rolling across the river. It's one of those types of descriptions. people say, well, couldn't it be a government? Could one of these, could the first horse be a governmental system? People talk about governments, or could it be a military? Well, I don't think John would have described them in a horse fashion, if that makes sense. I think if God was going to show him that a great military, a great army was going to take over the world, then John would probably see something that resembled. Now, this rider does carry a bow, which represents war. But I think that I think when this happens, for the people that are left on the earth, when it's time for the seals to be opened, I think we will actually see these 4 horses that are going to ride through. And again, it's going to be very, very quick, I think, what's going to happen. It's going to just fire off very, very quickly with a lot of things. Now, again, going back to what Jesus says, he says that there's going to be a lot of birth pains, that it's not just going to be, it's going to be completely quiet and still, and then all of a sudden everything hits. We're going through these things right now. We're going through a lot of the birth pains now with wars and famines and droughts and things like that. So I think when that first seal is opened, I could be so far off, they may take my preacher card, I don't know. But I think, as I read this and interpret this, this is it. This is the end. So it's not going to be something like, New Zealand, it's, like when we go to the new year, right? And we start with the countries over here, and it's a new year over there, but it hasn't hit here yet. It's not going to be like that. I mean, this is God. The creator of the heavens and the earth and all the stars and everything. When he's ready for it to end, it's going to end, And so I think we're going to read it that way. And then when we get to about the 6th seal, I think that's going to be the last for Christians. And I've got it on here. I will actually argue that that's between the 6th and the 7th seal, because there's a pause. Chapter 7 is a dramatic pause in things unfolding. And I think that's where the church is going to get raptured away. I think that's where God's going to reach down, grab his faithful followers, pull the church up, and then they're going to start with the first trumpets, which is going to be more judgments placed on the earth. Does that make sense? Again, that's just how I read it. And anytime you'd like to read any of the books I've got, you're more than welcome to, if that helps. Okay. Anything else? Everybody good? Any other questions? So let's go ahead and finish out the last 2 seals here. So we know that last week we started with the opening of the first 4. Remember, this is a very famous line and scene and artist renditions of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Right? So here it is. We know that only the Lamb was worthy to open the seals. So this wasn't anybody else. And there's a lot of thought to this as well, because, again, this is where Mormons, for example, this is a really difficult thing for them to describe and talk about. Because Jesus was important, but so was Joseph Smith. And so when they get to Revelation, now remember, Mormons didn't change the Bible. They didn't get in here like the Jehovah's Witnesses. The Jehovah's Witnesses, this is a very difficult conversation to have with them, because their Bible, remember, C.T. Russell did not like this. So this has been changed quite a bit, especially the part about adding and changing. We needed to change that, right, to give me the freedom to add and change as we see fit. But with Mormons, this is a very difficult passage for them, because Joseph Smith is elevated. And remember, God was a being of some sort at some point, and had a wife, and had and they birthed 2 children, Jesus and Satan, and so this whole trying to understand who is worthy to open the scroll in Mormon theology is very difficult, because is it Joseph Smith? Is it Jesus? Is it going to be one of these 44,000? Because again, they're elevated prophets on earth as well. So this gets a little hairy for them. But to make it simple, we know who does. It's Jesus, right? He's the only one that can. I think we saw a little bit of that this morning when we were talking about the garden scene. I think the garden scene really kind of brings forth the power and the imagery of what's going to happen. So Jesus is the only one that has the ability to do this. And once that he starts opening, what Christ is going to do is he's going to, or God I should say is going to do, is he's going to allow each of those 4 living creatures that are the guards of the throne to announce one of each of those 4. So he will give the power to those angels. Those angels will send those. Each seal was represented by a rider and a horse. Remember, the rider is not as important as the color of the horse. The horse was very, very important. The color was, and we get the rider on top. Now, the first horse was white. There's a lot of speculation on what this means. Was this Jesus? Is it the Antichrist? Or is it with just kind of general kind of humanity, if you will? What does the white horse represent? But we did know that the rider carried a bow, and the thought was aggression, conquer, war, those types of things. And so we see the second horse, red, which would represent the blood, which follows war. The third horse was poverty, was black, was poverty and famine, which obviously follows war as well. And then the fourth horse was pale, and this is the pale rider, right? This was death that follows. So that's just a kind of a quick overview of last week. So let's kind of start looking at this. So the first 5, and so here we're going to start diving into the 5th seal, but the first 5 are to be understood as a preliminary signs of God's judgments, right? These are the preliminary signs. Remember, the seals and then the trumpets, which are going to follow, are limited judgment, meaning that God is not going to wipe everyone out. Some of the thinking behind that, and I kind of think this way, is that God is giving everyone the opportunity to repent, change, do whatever they can to get to Christ. And again, what's really scary about all of this is that Scripture shows that no one does. And I don't know. I don't know if that means that no one will, if this is in such futuristic form that it's laid out, that meaning no one will. But in here, nobody does. As a matter of fact, the more that God does to them, the madder that they get. So I don't know, but these are partial judgments. These are partial things. And so it constitutes the events that take place before the final stages of history. And again, this is something we'll probably see on our own time, and I don't mean specifically our own time, but there's going to be earth dwellers that are going to be out. And this is carried out by the sinful actions and activities of man, right? God allows war to happen. God allows these things to happen. And that's one of the big questions that people have as well. If this God is loving of yours, and this God is this, and this God is that, why doesn't he stop it? Well, of course he can stop it. He can stop it any time he wants. But he allows these things to take place. And there's a lot to that. So again, 6th and 7th seal, this is where people will ask, well, which one is the rapture? Where does the Great Tribulation start? So again, my perspective is this, is that after the 6th seal, there is a pause, and this is where we get chapter 7. During that time, I think the church will be raptured up, because once the 7th seal is open, the first trumpet will blow, and the judgments of God will begin. And I think that's where his church is going to be raptured up. But that's just my 2 cents there. So again, this is just a little bit about what's going to happen. God allows war and its aftermath. And then the 7th seal is a direct pouring out of divine wrath, which then releases divine retribution on the earth dwellers. And that is the Great Tribulation. So that is finishing up what he needs to do with Israel, and that is punishing the Gentiles. So okay. So the first 4 seals, again, the 4 horsemen that come from Zechariah 1, and God's judgment upon his enemies. And there's the representation. So, all right, so now we're going to get into seal number 5 tonight. So let's read verses 9 through 11. So starting in verse 9, when he, so remember he, this is talking about the Lamb, when he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. And they called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and brothers who were to be killed as they had been was completed. So, kind of an interesting scene here. So, the 5th seal takes us from earth back to heaven. So, when the 5th seal is open, the activities on earth between the 4 horsemen have taken place, and they're probably ongoing, and things are happening. So we jump back from earth up to heaven. And what it really shows us, and it's going to take us to the martyrs. Now, it's going to push us up from the earth dwellers, the sinful nature of humans, complaining and criticizing and judging and just trying to disprove God. It's going to take us back up to heaven, and we're going to see the martyrs specifically speaking here. Now, this is where we're going to tie this in. This is back to the throne room scene, right? And so what is the throne room scene? A few weeks ago, we talked about what that looked like, and that is where God is. That is the word heaven, singular. So this is the presence of God right here, heaven. God is sitting on his throne, and underneath the throne and around the throne, we see all of the angelic beings, and with God being present are those that accepted Christ. Right, they're in the presence of God. This is what heaven is going to look like at this present moment, right now. They're in the presence of God, staring at the Creator of the universe. And so we're going to see these martyrs under the altar of heaven begin to speak. And who are these people? So those are who have died for their faith. These are the ones. So, and this is one reason why I don't think that the apostles would be one of the 24 groups here. Because we know that the 11 that were left after Judas, and then we know that Stephen was killed. We know that Paul was beheaded. So there's 13 right there. Now Stephen's not an apostle, but the point being is I think they're together. These are the martyrs. So these are the people that have gone out and been killed for their testimony. Now, so the question that a lot of times is kind of tricky. So what about people like Billy Graham? Right? He didn't die a martyr. He didn't die in overseas somewhere and got caught by a radical Islamic group and beheaded. That didn't happen to him, right? So is he there? Well, yes, obviously, yes, he is. He's present with them. But what we're seeing is the voice of the martyrs speaking. Watch that wasp right there. Greg, grab that. I can say it on Sunday nights. Now, Sunday mornings, I got to stay focused when that thing flies around. But these are the martyrs, right? These are the people that have died for their service to Christ. And I think it's important that we see this not because they're higher up, right? There's not a hierarchy level that Paul was higher than. There's Irenaeus, who was a Christian in the first century, and Irenaeus was higher than Billy Graham, and Billy Graham is higher than me. There's not like a hierarchy system. But what's happening here is God is allowing these martyrs to speak because they were killed for the service to Christ. And so they're dead because of the testimony of Jesus. And what they're crying out for, because you can read this, and there's actually some people that have trouble with this verse, because when you read it, how long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants and avenge our blood. So you can read this as, well, isn't that kind of selfish? And there's some people that have trouble with this verse, and they say, well, isn't this a very selfish thing? You're standing in front of the presence of God. What does it matter? So let me kind of explain this. It's that they're crying out for justice for God. They're tired of this world ridiculing, condemning, saying you're not real. They're tired of this voice against God. And so when you read this, I want you to kind of understand that the vocalness here and the terminology that's used here, this is not like, oh, they killed me, so you need to go kill them back real good. Go smash them real good. No, that's not what they're saying. Paul is not saying that. Peter's not saying that. They're saying, God, they're being disrespectful to you. Will you please stop this? We don't want our God to be talked to this way. So they're calling out for justice for God, not necessarily for themselves. So it's kind of an interesting way to understand that. And so as you read that, it's not about them. And so some people will say it's a sub-Christian verse, and I don't think so. It's not a cry for themselves, but they're being offended. And I'll tell you, it's funny. As I have felt like, every day I feel like I get closer to God, and as I study and pray and try to be more spiritual for Christ, I found myself getting more offended easily at things. There's things that a few years ago used to not bother me when people would say. Now my eyes go crossed when they say things. And one of the terminology, one of the words that absolutely drives me nuts is when people misuse the word hell. I can't stand it. I cannot stand it. They have no idea what they're saying, and that drives me bonkers. I can't handle that one. And when we use this slang term like this, it's like, no, that's not right. When you're talking about the worst place possible for eternity, forever. So don't use that term. But I find myself getting like that, and that's kind of that feeling here, is that the martyrs who gave their lives and suffered horrible deaths, they're tired of people mocking God. They're just tired of it, and they want it to be over with. But we see the inhabitants of the earth. Now, we've seen that once, and we're going to see it again in chapter 8. But it's these earth dwellers, is what they're kind of called. But whenever you see this, we saw it back in chapter 3. We'll see it in chapter 8 again. When you read about inhabitants of the earth, these are people who do not know Christ. This is what they're referring to. So when by the time we get to chapter 8, whether you think there's a rapture in 6 or 7, it doesn't seal 6 or 7. By that point, we're raptured up. So the people that are left are the people that have said no to Christ. So there's that. But something that's really neat is that God is listening. And this is a great reminder. So as the martyrs are speaking and they're saying, please just end this, it's not right for them to say this to you. God listens and He responds, and He's going to respond back to them. And again, I think this is a good thing for us. He hears us when we pray. He absolutely hears us when we pray. And He may not vocalize His response with us, as we know that, but He absolutely hears us. And I think that's just a beautiful reminder that God is on the throne at this moment. And when we pray, it never, ever falls on deaf ears. It goes to who it's supposed to go to, and He hears. So it's a really neat thing. So when when they're speaking and they're saying these things, they're saying, God, just do this. So in verse 11, He answers the prayers. And so it's the crying out for justice. And so He gives them a white robe. So at this phase, He's going to give them a white robe, which means that they are now pure, and that they are, the martyrs themselves or in that phase. And that's a big statement, because we won't get our white robe, right, until we get to about chapter 19 or so, when we start getting cleansed before our final thing of judgment. The Christian judgment will stand, and then we come in white, like our wedding, right, the marriage of the Lamb and the church. But so they're given a white robe. But he also tells them something else here, and I really like this. He tells them you need to wait, you need to rest, and this is a big one. This is a very big point here. You need to watch others die as you did for your faith. So that's a strong statement. Now, this is another really interesting statement that he's saying here. So, this is a little bit deep, so I'll kind of tread lightly on this one. So, does this mean that these people? Does this mean that these people are able to watch what's happening now? This is a big question, because we've established that when you're in the presence of God, we're not looking back at the earth, right? It's just, and I don't believe that. So how are they able to watch others die for their faith? I believe that what's being said here is that as martyrs are being transported in, if you will. I don't know the best terminology, but when they arrive in the presence of God, I think they stand different. They may be separated a little bit differently. Because here's the question to think about. We'll use Billy Graham, great Christian man, lives his whole life for God, passes away at an old age, right? I mean, it was 90s, 80s, upper 80s, 90s, something like that. Passes away. We know that he's in the presence of God. Worked his whole life for Jesus to bring others to Christ. What happens? What happens to that death row inmate that just seconds before the needle is pushed through, however executions are done now, and he says, "I'm sorry, forgive me, Jesus"? What about the sinner on the cross? They've lived their whole life, and at the last second, they get scared, and they pray to God. Now, this is also a heart issue as well. This is as much of a heart issue as it is anything. Jesus knows the heart. So this is just, I'm just scared, so I'm just going to scream it out, or I'm actually, that was a bad life. I made a mistake. I wish I would have lived for you, Jesus, and see. So the point being is this: do they get to stand in the same place as Paul or Peter? Do they get to stand in the same place as Billy Graham? So we can come back to that one, but I want to just lay this out here because I want you to think about this. Here's what I think it is. I think those that die as a martyr, that say, I'm going to go to where you send me, God, and if I die, I die, and I'm fine with that. Where others will say, I don't feel that calling. Billy Graham, right? Billy Graham is a prime example. I don't feel that calling. So does that mean that they're different? Does that mean they're hierarchy? No, it doesn't mean that at all. But I do think when the presence of God, I think that there's going to be, I don't want to say two sections, but we see that the martyrs are given a white robe. And I think that's kind of what the symbol is that these martyrs have lived a little bit different. Not better, just different. And so they're going to be standing here while we're going to be standing here. So what about them watching others die? I think, and I say all that to get to this point, their souls will increase, kind of going to this side of the room, if that makes sense. So you got the left side and the right side, per se. C.S. Lewis talks a lot about this, and this was a Church of England thinking, but he pictured it as a beautiful valley with a mountain in the middle. And for those children, martyrs, those that just weren't the average person, that just was a good Christian person that lived a life, they were up the mountain a little bit higher. Whereas people like death row, last minute, but it was a true heart change. they're still there. They're just more down in the valley, if that makes sense. So that's the way Lewis would explain it. We'll come back to that one in a minute. But I wanted to point that out to you because God says you got to watch. You've got to watch others die. I don't think they're watching the earth. I really don't. I don't think you will be standing in the presence of God and watching what is taking place on this earth. I don't think so. Because that, again, is the punishment that we find in hell. I think in hell, you do watch. You absolutely watch. And I think that's as much a spiritual, mental, emotional punishment as anything. You're watching the loved ones, your friends and family, the people that you ran with and all these things. You're watching them and wanting to vocalize to them, stop, don't do this, look what's happening to me. But you can't. So that's my thoughts on that. So again, take that with a grain of salt. But just an interesting statement, very bold statement. He's saying, watch, you need to rest, you need to wait, be patient. I'm in control, I will take care of this. But you've got to watch. You've got to watch some other people be martyred for their faith. All right, moving on. So we get to the sixth seal at this. So let's read verses 12 and 14. I watched as he, Christ, the Lamb, opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake, and the sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair, and the whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to the earth as late figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The sky receded like a scroll rolling up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. So the sixth seal is a flash ahead. This is what's going to happen when the trumpets start blowing and eventually when the bowls are open and God's wrath is really pushing out. And I think, so this is a very apocalyptic picture here. So was John literally watching the sky roll back? Was he literally watching these islands just disappear? That's kind of a question thing. We're not really sure on that. But the point of this is the announcement of the end. So by the time the sixth seal is opened, that's it. Because when the sixth seal is open, the trumpet will start on the seventh, and it's no stopping at this point. So he's really kind of directing the church's attention. Remember, this letter goes to these 7 churches, and he's directing their attention to what is going to take place. So a very, and this is the ominous picture. These are the things, this is kind of the scary part that we're going to see here. The earthquakes, the sun turned black. And this is where when people are trying, especially those prophetic type of preachers and belief systems, this is what they see. So when they see an earthquake, they instantly jump. Well, Revelation says, in chapter 6, that there's an earthquake. Well, I think the earthquake that we're going to see here, because remember, he says there was a great earthquake. Not a series of earthquakes. This is going to be the earthquake that's literally going to split the United States in half, right? This would be the knocking California out earthquake. This is going to be the big one. This is a great earthquake. It's not a series of small ones. And so the sun turned black. And so this is where, people kind of read into these signs and those things like that. Verse 12. Again, it's hard to interpret these things, but there's some really good scripture there with Isaiah 13 and Isaiah 54 with really some good cosmic wording, what God is doing here, those types of things. But I put up here that God is shaking the universe, and I think that's what John is trying to get across. That when this is happening, as you're reading this, or your priest in your church is reading this as you're one of the 7 churches, and you hear this description of what's going to happen, God is shaking the universe. Pay attention. This is what's going to unfold. This is what's going to take place. And then we get these last few verses, 15 through 17, and this ties into the sixth seal right here. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, every slave, every free man hid in caves among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb." For the great day of the wrath has come, and who can stand? So remember, just a few things on this one. When you start there, especially in verse 16, the wrath of the Lamb, this is almost like an oxymoron. I've never seen any lambs that wrathful. But remember, this is not the lamb that will be the Passover lamb that we'll celebrate in 2 weeks on the cross. This is the conquering lamb. This is the warrior lamb. This is the lamb that's going to return. This is the lamb that John didn't recognize when he saw that was the Jesus Christ that I was walking with for 3.5 years. That's not that one. This is the apocalyptic lamb. So mankind is going to experience pure terror. This is it. This is the sad and scary part. And this is why I think that the church is going to get raptured kind of at this point. But this is the futuristic events that's going to take place. And I just don't think God is going to let His church go through this. But it's interesting because He goes from every facet. So for all of those that live out on the earth and feel privileged, right, especially the rich in America that feel privileged, there's a sports figure. I don't follow sports as much as I used to, but there's a sports figure. Right now, there's a lot of things happening to these male sport figures. And now, again, I don't know if it's just cause or not. I'm just saying that a lot of times, because we have elevated sports and athletes, right? Athletes can almost do no wrong. We just put them on posters and we do all these things. Actors, musicians, things like that, they're starting to crumble. And that's the point that God is making here, is that it doesn't matter. You can be a king or you can be a slave, but every person will feel the wrath at this point. And that's this point here. No one's going to be able to escape. Your money won't save you. Your wealth won't save you. Your stuff won't save you. None of that will. And so verse 16, another reference of God who sits on the throne, which means all are saying His name. And so here it is. Verse 16, hide us from the face of Him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. We've got a few minutes here. If somebody would, I'll continue on, but if somebody will pull up Philippians 2, verse 9 through 11, and read that for us really quick. But as you're pulling that up, let me continue on. Verse 17, for the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? Now, the word great here is a really unique version of the word great. And it has a double meaning. First, it's just meaning great, large, and powerful. The final day of God, it's here. The events are going to take place. There's no stopping. You're either with Christ or you're not. But it also is a great because it means that God is now making all things new for the Christian. The voice of the martyrs, the voice of those that have been persecuted for their faith, that have died for the testimony of Jesus, all of the other Christians that have lived their life for Christ, forsaking the world. It's a great day for them because God is now going to usher in and start this process of reconciliation. The new heaven, the new earth, the new Jerusalem, all that's going to take fold. And so we see this, though, a very powerful thing here. The wrath of the Lamb. This is a conquering Lamb. This is a judgment Lamb. And it ends with this question: who can stand? Who can stand? And chapter 7 is going to give us the answer about who can stand against this. And we pretty much know the answer, that no one's going to be able to stand. But we get some explanation. So, does somebody have Philippians 2, 9 through 11? Do I have that one?
Therefore God exalted Him to the highest place, and gave Him a name above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth. And every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
So there it is. All of that we've read and heard, and for most of us, that's been in church most of our life, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, all of that stuff. This is it. This is where it will now unfold, and this is what is being said here. Hide us from the wrath of the Lamb, that Jesus Christ, to finish out Philippians 2:11, that Jesus Christ is Lord. That's what they will confess. It doesn't mean they're going to repent. It just means they're going to confess. And they're going to pray for rocks and caves and things to hide them because it's that terrible of a day. So, very powerful ending. Remember, the sixth seal is the flash ahead. Here's what's going to take place. And so what we're going to read through the trumpets and through the bowls is going to summarize and give us the details of basically verses 12 all the way down through 17. All of that bad stuff will come through the trumpets and the bowls. So to kind of close this out, the first four seals of the apocalypse, right, are different than the last three, but it's this pause between the sixth and seventh seal in which the common thought is that the rapture will take place. Before all of this, where people are screaming and hiding and confessing that Christ is Lord, those that have already confessed that Jesus is Lord, the Christian, will be moved. But at this point, when we get into the seventh seal and the beginning of the trumpets, it will be too late. The confession that they're making is, I was wrong, and it's too late. So, very, very powerful thing. So the seventh seal will introduce the trumpets, and we'll talk about the 144 that has been sealed in chapter 7 next week. So here's the dramatic pause, and we'll answer the question. So I said it was going to be a little shorter. I got done with about 3 minutes to spare. It's not bad, is it? All right. Usually we're about 5 minutes over, so we're good. We'll go ahead and stop and discuss.